The twin moons of Velara burned in the sky like golden eyes watching from above. The alien jungle pulsed with life, filled with strange glowing insects and the deep growls of unseen beasts. From orbit, the planet looked peaceful. But on the ground, it was anything but that. War had returned to Velara after centuries of silence. The Empress of the Karethari, known as Phyrexia the Flame-Blooded, stood on a cliff watching her troops prepare for battle. She was tall, deadly, and impossibly beautiful, covered in battle paint and glowing ceremonial armor that shimmered with energy. Her eyes, golden and burning, scanned the forest below for any sign of the human invaders. She had not expected them to land, and she certainly hadn't expected them to survive her planet's brutal surface. She turned to her second in command, her voice low and fierce. "Let none of them leave alive," she said. Her mating season had begun, an ancient Karethari tradition that filled the strongest females with overwhelming instincts. Usually, her suitors died in ritual combat or burned under her touch. Now she had war to fuel her fire. But then she heard something unusual on the battlefield. A human voice laughing in the face of her stormtroopers. His name was Elias Creed, a scout who had crash-landed days before the rest of his unit. The jungle should have torn him apart. But instead, it seemed to move aside for him. He moved like he had lived on this world all his life. The beasts sniffed him and left him alone. He drank water from vines that were poisonous to others. The Karethari called it luck. Phyrexia called it something else. Elias found an abandoned Karethari outpost filled with supplies, strange weapons, and armor that hummed with power. He didn't understand it, but he adapted quickly. His survival wasn't just instinct, it was defiance. The kind Phyrexia hadn't seen in centuries. She had killed many warriors, but none had dared grin at her while bleeding from the chest. Elias did. He winked at her like she was some common soldier, not the deadliest female on the planet. The Empress ordered her warriors to bring him in. Alive, she wanted to see what made him different. Why the jungle didn't reject him. Why her own heartbeat had quickened when their eyes met across the burning ruins of her forward camp. She told herself it was just the heat of the mating season. But her generals began to whisper. Elias didn't fight like a trained soldier. He fought like someone who didn't care if he died. Yet he always survived. When they sent a bio-beast after him, he fed it a local fruit and scratched its chin. When their hunter squad tried to trap him, he led them into quicksand, then whistled as he walked away. Every time Phyrexia watched him through her scrying lens, her pulse surged like fire in her blood. The priestesses warned her. Mating season must not be taken lightly. To claim a male in this cycle would mean bonding, emotion, fire that could not be undone. She ignored them. She had no need for love. Only a strong enough male to match her power and endure her fury. But the idea of the human had already rooted in her mind like a seed of fire. By the time Elias reached her temple, the sky had turned red with ash, and the jungle sang with the sounds of beasts drawn to the scent of power. He stood before the great stone gate, breathing hard, armor dented, hair matted, but eyes full of life. He wasn't afraid. Not even when the Empress herself stepped out to greet him, her voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "You're in for a rough ride," she said with a smirk that could slice through stone. The wind howled through the Temple of Flames as Elias stood face to face with the Empress of Velara. His heart pounded, not out of fear, but out of something he didn't understand yet. Phyrexia was a storm made flesh. Her eyes glowed like molten gold. Her body shimmered with power. And yet, he didn't step back. He tilted his head and smirked. As if he had just met someone interesting in a bar, Phyrexia studied him in silence. Her warriors had watched this man survive against poison, beasts, and heat that melted steel. But now he was here, in her sacred ground, where no male had ever stood unbroken. Her instincts screamed for battle. Her blood called for union. It was the dangerous balance of the Karethari mating cycle. A deadly trial few males lived through. None had ever dared challenge her without trembling. She raised a clawed hand, and the torches flared to life around them. The jungle outside fell. Silent, every beast felt her power surge. The temple's walls seemed to pulse with her presence. Elias didn't flinch. He looked around like he was taking in the view, then met her eyes again. "Nice place." "Bit warm," he said, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. That made her pause. He was either a fool or something far more dangerous. Her lips curled into a sharp smile. "You've come far, human." "What do you want?" she asked. Elias shrugged. "Didn't have much choice. Your people shot my ride out of the sky. Thought I'd come say hi before I died of heat stroke," he replied. His voice was dry, but his eyes burned with challenge. The Empress stepped down from her platform. Each step echoed like a drumbeat through the temple. Her armor gleamed. Her tattoos glowed. Her presence filled the chamber like fire fills a furnace. She stopped in front of him, so close he could feel her heat. "You amuse me, Elias Creed, but this is no place for jokes. You stand at the edge of a ritual older than your species. You are not meant to survive it," she said. Elias looked up at her. He had faced death before, in war zones and wild planets, but this was different. There was something magnetic about her. Dangerous but not cruel. He could see curiosity behind her gold eyes, maybe even loneliness. "Then let's make history," he said. And without permission, without fear, he reached out and touched her arm. The temple trembled. The sacred energy that surrounded her flared in protest. But it didn't burn him, it welcomed him. The priestesses gasped in the shadows. The warriors tensed. Virexia's eyes widened for a heartbeat before narrowing into a gleam of interest. "Foolish, brave, human," she whispered. No one had ever touched her like that and lived. She raised her hand, ready to strike, to test his strength. But Elias caught her wrist, not forcefully but firmly. Not in defiance but in understanding. "I didn't come here to fight you," he said. "I came because I felt something. Something calling me. And now I think it's you." His words hung in the air like thunderclouds before a storm. Virexia yanked her hand away, turning from him, conflicted. Her instincts roared for dominance. Her duty screamed tradition, but her heart cold for centuries stirred. This human was not a weakling. He was not prey. He was something new. A fire that matched her own. She walked to the altar and placed both hands on the glowing stone. Her voice rang out in the ancient tongue, calling forth the next stage of the trial. The ground rumbled. From beneath the temple floor, fire and mist rose together. The trial of Firebond had begun. If Elias survived the next phase, he would not just be spared. He would be claimed. No escape, no return. A bond of soul and flame. Virexia turned back to him, her eyes now shining brighter than ever. "Then come, Elias Creed, prove your worth. Or burn in my passion," she said. Elias stepped forward without hesitation. The trial of Firebond began with no warning. The floor split into glowing red cracks as heat surged upward like a living thing. Elias took a deep breath, sweat rolling down his face as the temperature soared. He didn't back down. He stepped forward with steady feet, eyes locked on Virexia's glowing figure across the chamber. Virexia stood within a ring of golden fire that didn't burn her. Her hands were raised to the sky, calling upon the ancestral force of her bloodline. Her body shimmered with power, and her voice echoed through the sacred temple. "Let the flame judge the soul. Let the fire reveal the truth," she said as the ritual intensified. Massive stone columns around the chamber lit with blue fire. One by one, casting strange shadows on the walls. Beasts howled in the distance, as if the jungle itself felt what was coming. Elias moved between the fires, each step a test of his will. The heat clawed at his lungs. The floor burned beneath his boots. But he kept walking, from the ceiling. Golden sparks rained down like falling stars. They touched his skin, yet caused no harm. The Karethari priestesses whispered among themselves. No outsider had ever entered the trial and remained standing. No male had endured this much without collapsing. But Elias didn't fall. He reached the center of the chamber and raised his hand toward Phyrexia. A shockwave of energy erupted between them. The fire flared brighter, creating a pillar that surrounded them both. Inside the fire, time felt slower. Elias looked into Phyrexia's eyes and saw something ancient, something hungry, something beautiful. She walked toward him with purpose, her breath shallow, her fingers glowing as they traced the air. "You carry no magic," she said, circling him slowly. "No royal blood, no divine link. And yet you stand here." Her voice held a note of disbelief mixed with something deeper. "You are not of my kind, but your flame answers mine." She reached out and touched his chest, feeling his heart beating like a war drum. Elias didn't understand her rituals, but he understood the way she looked at him now. Like he was more than a challenge. Like he was something forbidden that she couldn't resist. "Maybe your fire was looking for something new," he said softly. "Something that doesn't try to conquer it. Just hold it without fear." His words echoed through the flame like a promise. The trial reacted. A rush of wind circled the chamber, lifting the flames into a spiral above them. Symbols glowed in the air, old and sacred. The temple trembled under the weight of ancient power. Phyrexia closed her eyes, fighting the rush of emotions. This was not how it was meant to be. A human was not supposed to match her fire. Suddenly the fire tested him. Images of his past surged around him: loss, war, grief, and survival. The trial exposed his soul. It showed him at his weakest and demanded strength. Elias stood firm, his fists clenched. "I'm not perfect," he said aloud, "but I don't run." The fire accepted his words, flaring high in response. Phyrexia opened her eyes and walked toward him again. This time she placed both hands on his shoulders. Her touch was warm, electric, alive. "You should have burned," she whispered, "but instead you lit the flames higher." Her body trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the growing bond pulling them together. The priestesses could feel it too. They stepped back from the ritual circle, whispering in awe. The fire had chosen, not just for passion but for union. The sacred bond of firebond was forming. If it completed, Phyrexia would no longer be Empress alone. Elias would be bound to her soul, her power, and her destiny. A final ring of flame encircled them, rising high above their heads. If either stepped back, the bond would break. Elias didn't move. He looked into her golden eyes and said just one word: stay. And in that moment, Phyrexia, warrior of 10,000 battles, lowered her head and leaned forward. She pressed her forehead to his. Phyrexia's forehead rested against his, and for the first time in centuries, her fire steadied. The flames around them no longer roared with wild hunger. Instead, they danced gently, glowing in deep golds and reds. The trial of firebond did not end with pain. It ended with acceptance. Her breath matched his. Her heartbeat, once like thunder, now moved in rhythm with the human before her. He was not what she expected. She had prepared herself to crush him, to test him until he broke. But Elias never tried to fight her power. He simply stood through it. He never raised a weapon against her. Yet he met her gaze every time without hesitation. And now the trial had accepted him in a way it had never accepted any other. As the flames faded, only the glowing marks on their skin remained. Ancient Karethari runes, symbols of bonding, shimmered softly on Elias's chest and Phyrexia's arms. The priestesses dropped to their knees in silence. The Empress had chosen. Or rather, The fire had chosen for her. She stepped back, not with pride, but with something unfamiliar peace. Elias looked around the chamber. The once violent ritual temple now seemed quiet, almost sacred. He could feel something inside himself had changed. He didn't know the meaning of the glowing marks, but he felt their weight. "So does this mean I passed?" he asked, half grinning as he rubbed the back of his neck. Phyrexia didn't answer right away. She walked in a slow circle around him, her eyes studying every inch of him. Her body still burned with energy, but it was no longer wild or out of control. It was focused, directed. She had known war. She had known conquest. But this was something far more dangerous. She had known. "No equal until now. You didn't just pass," she said. "You changed the rules." Her voice was low, almost reverent. The air around her shimmered with power that no longer surged against the walls. It now moved inward, toward the bond. Toward him. "I don't know what the stars have written, but they wrote you into my fire," she continued, her voice nearly a whisper. Outside the temple, the jungle reacted. The beasts howled not in rage, but in awe. The trees pulsed with bioluminescent light. The winds shifted. Far above them, the twin moons crossed each other in the sky, a rare alignment said to mark the turning of empires. The world itself seemed to acknowledge what had happened in that sacred place. Elias walked beside Phyrexia, side by side now. There was no need for more trials, no need for more words. But beyond the temple walls, not everyone would accept what had happened. Her generals still believed a human could not rule beside her. The Karethari were proud. Many would see this as weakness, or worse, betrayal. As they exited into the light, Phyrexia stopped. "They will challenge us," she said. "They will test your right to walk beside me." Elias nodded. "Let them," he replied. "I'm done running. I didn't survive your planet to kneel to anyone else." The look they shared was one of steel and fire. Within hours, word spread across the jungle cities. The Empress had bonded with an offworlder. The Firebond had chosen a human. Some were afraid, others were furious, and many wanted blood. The ancient warrior caste, bound by code, demanded tradition. If Elias wished to keep the bond, he would have to stand against them in the trial of blades. Phyrexia tried to stop them, but Elias stepped forward. "If this is your way, then I'll walk it," he said. "But not alone." She placed her hand on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. "You won't be," she said. Together, they would face what came next. Not as predator and prey, but as something the galaxy had never seen before. Fire and flesh. Alien and human. Bound not by dominance, but by something stronger. Respect, asterisk. The arena stood at the heart of the ancient Karethari stronghold, carved into black stone and surrounded by towering statues of warrior queens long dead. The ground was scorched and cracked from countless duels fought over generations. Crowds filled the upper tiers, their roars rising like a thunderstorm. They had come to witness the impossible, a human standing in the trial of blades. Elias walked into the arena without armor. He wore only the ritual markings and a simple cloth over his chest, revealing the glowing runes left by the firebond. In his hand, he carried a blade shaped from the temple's fire crystal, a gift from Phyrexia herself. He didn't need to shout or posture. He just stood tall and waited. The first challenger was a beast of muscle and fury, a Karethari warlord named Shungar. His claws were coated in obsidian. His armor gleamed with predator bones. He circled Elias like a wolf, baring his teeth with every step. "I will end this shame," he growled. "No human touches our queen and walks free." Elias didn't answer. He studied his opponent's footwork, the twitch of his claws, the way his body shifted before each strike. When the attack came, it was fast and brutal, but Elias moved like flowing water. He ducked, turned, and struck with precision. The first blow cut Shungar's thigh. The second sliced his shoulder. The warlord roared and lunged again, but Elias sidestepped and used his opponent's weight against him. With a swift movement, he knocked the blade from Shungar's hand and brought his own blade to the warrior's throat. "Yield," he said, calm and firm. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the warlord dropped to one knee and lowered his head. The crowd went silent. One by one, the remaining challengers stepped forward. Warriors of all ranks and houses entered the arena, testing him in pairs, then in groups. Elias fought without hesitation. His style was unlike theirs. He was unpredictable, sharp. He didn't overpower them, he outthought them. Phyrexia watched from the royal seat, her hands clenched on the armrests. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from awe. Elias fought like no one she had seen. Not as a brute, but as a mind sharpened by hardship. Each movement told a story of survival. Each strike carried his will to endure. By the time the last challenger fell, the sun had begun to dip beneath the jungle's edge. The arena was stained with sweat and blood, but Elias still stood. His chest heaved with effort, and his blade dripped with heat, but his eyes never wavered. He turned to the crowd and lifted his weapon high. A moment of silence stretched across the arena. Then the chant began, slow at first, then louder. "Firebond! Firebond! Firebond!" The people who once doubted him now roared his name. Even the oldest warriors bowed their heads. He had earned not just survival. He had earned respect. Phyrexia descended the steps toward him. The firelight danced across her face as she walked with power and pride. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She placed her hand over his chest, and he did the same. The bond between them flared once more, brighter than before. The trial of blades was over. That night, the jungle city burned with light. Lanterns floated above the trees. Music echoed through the hills. The Empress and her chosen stood together before the fire altar as the people celebrated. Warriors, priestesses, and even beasts of the wild howled into the night sky. A new chapter had begun. Elias didn't understand every word of their songs, but he understood the meaning. He had faced their judgment and walked away stronger. He was no longer an outsider. He was now a part of something ancient, something alive, and Phyrexia, once feared as untouchable, now stood not above him, but beside him. The night after the trial of blades was calm, but tension still hung in the air. The people of Velara celebrated, yet behind their joy was confusion. A human had not only survived their empress, but had become her chosen. Such a thing had never happened in the history of the Karethari. Phyrexia stood at the balcony of her high tower, her golden eyes fixed on the horizon. She had won 1,000 wars, crushed empires, endured assassins, traitors, and uprisings. But none of those battles shook her like the presence of Elias Creed. He was not made for her world, yet he now ruled half of it through fire and bond. Inside, Elias rested on the ceremonial stone bed carved with ancient markings. His wounds were healing slowly, treated by Karethari priestesses who once refused to look him in the eye. Now they obeyed his words, called him by the sacred title of Firebound. But Elias didn't want titles. He wanted clarity. He rose and walked to the balcony, joining Phyrexia in silence. For a moment, they didn't speak. The stars above them shimmered through drifting clouds, and the jungle glowed beneath their feet. Finally he said, "I didn't come here to take a crown. I came to survive." Phyrexia turned toward him, her face unreadable. "You did more than survive," she replied. "You changed everything, our laws, our future, me." She placed her hand on his, warm and firm. "But the galaxy will not accept this peace. The Council of Flames will see our union as a threat. They will come for us. Not to challenge, but to destroy." Elias didn't flinch. "Then we give them a reason to be afraid," he said. "They think passion is weakness. They've forgotten what it means to fight for something worth holding." Phyrexia smiled faintly, not with cruelty, but with pride. He spoke not as a stranger, but as one of her blood now. That night, Phyrexia summoned her war council. The generals entered, heads bowed, unsure of their place now that the firebond had changed their hierarchy. Some still doubted. Others feared the Empress had grown soft. But when she spoke, they listened. When Elias stepped beside her, they stood. "Straighter, we do not abandon our strength," Phyrexia said. "We evolve it. This human has passed the trials. He has earned the fire. He stands as my equal, not by mercy, but by merit." Her words echoed through the stone chamber like a storm. None dared argue. Not after what they had witnessed in the arena. Elias spoke next. "I know I'm not one of you. But I didn't come to bend you to my ways. I came because your fire called to something in me. Now it burns in both of us. If war comes, I'll stand at her side. Not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as her blade." The council dispersed, silent but stirred. Change was never easy. But even the old warriors could feel it in the air. Something ancient had been reborn. Not just between a human and an empress, but within the soul of their people. The fire no longer divided. It united. As days passed, scouts returned with troubling news. Ships from the Council of Flames were approaching. Carriers, destroyers, and harvest barges moved toward Velara's outer moons. The council believed the firebond weakened the Empress. They would test her strength through war. Phyrexia prepared her people. Her warriors sharpened their blades. Her ships activated long-sleeping weapons hidden in the mountains. The beasts of the jungle stirred with violent purpose, ready to defend the heart of their world. But this time, Elias was not on the edge of the fight. He was at its center. Beside her on the war deck, Elias studied the incoming fleet. "We could try diplomacy," he offered. Phyrexia raised a brow. "And if they spit on it?" she asked. Elias nodded once. "Then we burn the sky." The enemy fleet entered Velara's orbit with no warnings and no greetings. Massive cruisers darkened the sky like floating mountains. Their engines hummed with power meant for planetary siege. From orbit, their commanders broadcast only one message: surrender the human, dissolve the firebond, or be erased. Phyrexia stood at the helm of her sky fortress, her golden armor alive with light. She listened to their threat in silence. Then she turned off the comlink without a word. Her gaze shifted to Elias, who stood beside her with calm eyes and a firm jaw. "They think this bond is our weakness," she said. Elias nodded, adjusting the strap on his shoulder blade. "They think wrong," he replied. He looked at the sky filled with incoming ships. They outnumbered the Karethari forces 10-1. But numbers weren't everything. Not when the fire of Velara still lived. In its people and in its queen, Phyrexia called her generals, hunters, and seers into the war chamber. She laid out her strategy not as a ruler commanding troops, but as a warrior inviting her kin to stand with her. "They come to test our soul," she said. "Let them find it burning brighter than their stars." Elias took command of the outer defenses. His tactics were strange to the Karethari, but sharp. He used the terrain, redirected power from the crystal spires, and built traps in the canyons. When the invaders began landing dropships, they walked directly into firestorms and ambushes. The battle stretched across jungles, cliffs, and rivers. War beasts charged into armored mechs. Karethari warriors leapt from trees with blades like lightning. The sky burned red as firecraft danced in combat with alien fighters. In the center of it all stood Elias and Phyrexia, fighting side by side. She moved with precision and fury, slicing through enemies with her blazing spear. He fought with brutal efficiency, using alien weapons like they were part of his body. Every time they touched, the bond between them flared brighter. The invaders called them a myth in their desperate transmissions. By the third day, half the council's fleet was destroyed. Valara's warriors pressed forward, reclaiming the sky inch by inch. Elias led a raid on the command vessel of the invaders. He breached its core with a team of Karethari elites and confronted their fleet general. The alien general looked down on Elias, confused and angry. "Why do you fight for her?" he demanded. "You are not of their kind." Elias stared back without blinking. "I don't fight for blood," he said. "I fight for who stood beside me when no one else did." Then he struck. The command vessel exploded from within. The remaining enemy ships lost their coordination and began to retreat. From her war tower, Phyrexia raised her spear, sending a signal to all warriors of Valara. The final assault began. The skies lit up in defiance. As the last enemy ship fled the system, silence returned to Valara. The people looked to the horizon, to the stars beyond, and realized they had survived something greater than war. They had faced extinction and stood tall. Because of one bond. One choice. Phyrexia descended the stone steps of her temple, her armor cracked, her skin marked with battle burns. But she walked with pride. Elias waited at the base, blood on his hands, dust on his face. When she reached him, they did not speak. She simply placed her hand over his. The priestesses sang from the cliffs. The fire pits roared with new life. All of Valara echoed with the sound of a world reborn through battle and bond. Asterisk, the war was over, but Valara was forever changed. The ruins of enemy ships still littered the high cliffs and deep forests. Smoke had faded from the air, replaced by fresh wind and the scent of wildflowers blooming across the scorched earth. Life had returned quickly, but nothing returned the same as before. Phyrexia sat in the center of the ancient flame hall, surrounded by her elders, generals, and priestesses. The fires around them glowed with calm light. No one questioned her place as ruler anymore, and none questioned the presence of the human sitting beside her. Elias Creed was no longer a visitor. He was flame-bound. The council asked for plans. They wanted to rebuild walls, reinforce ships, train new warriors. But Phyrexia held up her hand. "Let us not build from fear," she said. "Let us build from fire and unity." Her voice no longer carried just strength. It carried warmth, purpose, change. After the meeting, she led Elias to the high cliffs above the temple. They stood where the twin moons could be seen crossing paths in the sky. The same alignment that had marked the beginning of their bond now returned to witness its future. She looked at him with the fire still in her eyes, but now it didn't burn to destroy. It burned to protect. "I never expected to bond with someone like you," she said. "I never believed my fire could merge with something born of a different world." Elias smiled faintly, stepping closer. "And I never thought I'd find home this far from Earth," he said. "But here I am, still breathing, still standing, still beside you." Their hands touched once again. The marks from the fire bond pulsed gently between their skin. The jungle below responded with waves of light from bioluminescent plants. The mountains echoed with distant calls of beasts now quiet in reverence. The entire world seemed to pause for them. In the days that followed, Elias took on the role of ambassador, not to rule, but to build bridges between Valara and the worlds beyond. Some came with doubt, others came with threats. But all left changed. They saw a human who did not dominate, but who stood beside a queen that could burn stars. Together, they taught others what true strength looked like. Not in conquest, not in submission, but in unity, in survival through trust. In fire that did not consume, but carried warmth into darkness. Phyrexia's people flourished. New cities rose beside ancient temples. Warriors trained with pride, no longer out of fear of enemies, but to guard what they had built together. Young ones grew up hearing the story of the human who stood in fire and did not break. Of the Empress who allowed herself to love, and in doing so, became stronger. One night, under the same stars where it all began, Elias asked her, "Do you ever regret it? Letting the bond choose me?" Phyrexia turned her gaze to him. Her fingers brushed the old scars on his shoulder, the ones earned in her temple, in her arena, in her war. "No," she said. "You did not take my fire. You gave it meaning. Years passed. Their legends spread beyond the system. Poets and scribes carried their tale to distant colonies. Some worshipped it. Some doubted it. But no one could ignore it. A fire once bound only to destruction had found harmony with something soft, strange, and human. And long after the battles faded into memory, long after the weapons were hung in sacred halls, the people of Velara still gathered around the fire. Every season, they told the story not of conquest, but of balance, of two flames that did not burn each other out, but burned brighter together. Their names were etched into the altar stone, side by side. Phyrexia, flame-blooded Empress of Velara. Elias Creed, the human who stood in fire and stayed.